She's a one.
So good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be there. Actually, it's my birthday, so yeah, never had such an attendance for my birthday. Yeah. I have three very nice people to introduce, working for a very nice and renowned VC. So first of all, I would like to ask Cayetana to come here. Girls first. We're in France.
So I stay here?
Yeah, please. Or here, whatever.
Okay. Is it working? Yeah. Perfect. So my name is Caye. I'm an investor at Bulletproof Capital. It's the most active Series A fund based out of the UK, but we invest across all over Europe. We're sector agnostic, and we'll tell you more in a second.
Teasing. Maybe Louis, if you can come.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Louis. I work at Point9, and we are the most active seed fund in the world. That's almost half a joke, but happy to tell you more after.
Don't stay too close each other. Maybe it's.
It'll be fine.
And Ben, lastly, you have one last mic.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ben. I work for Atomico. We're a Series A and beyond fund based in London. We may not be maybe the most active Series A fund, I guess, but we back really kind of big vision, disruptive entrepreneurs really looking to kind of change industries.
Okay, thanks. So we're supposed to provide some bulletproof elements to raise at two stages, which would be Seed and A Serie for a B2B startup. So normally you're more likely concerned. As a startup, you should consider VC like a client, meaning there is a market. Each VC has his own vision, has his own trend, his wallet as well. Not everyone has the same amount of money and the way you wish to use it. And they are not active at the same time for your own GT, or maybe you're totally out of their focus as well. We are lucky to have here three tech-oriented funds, but you still have very big specificities. So if you can go through that, maybe Ben to change.
Of course. So yeah, we're a Series A and beyond focused fund. So we primarily invest at what we call a Series A stage. It's probably more of a kind of West Coast Series A stage. So our initial investments tend to be $5 to $15 million. And then that's our core. That's done across Europe. So we're based, most of the team in London. We have one of my colleagues based in Paris, one in Stockholm, and a couple of others elsewhere. But we can also invest at the later stages as well. So we'll invest up to $30 or $40 million into a company, either at the later stages or over the lifetime. And as a kind of sector fund, we're pretty generalist. So we invest in consumer companies, we invest in B2B and enterprise companies, which is the part of the team that I run. And we also invest in kind of what we call frontier tech companies, but those are really kind of science and R&D led companies that are often pre kind of full product launch when we invest. And yeah, we have a big fund. We have a $750 million fund, which means we're really looking for really kind of billion-dollar companies. We like every investment we make to have the potential to be a multi-billion-dollar company, and therefore to kind of be a kind of fund returner for us. And so it means we look for companies with big vision, tackling big problems, and looking at really big markets.
Thanks, Ben. And Cayetana, maybe? Caye, what?
Sure. So very similarly, we also invest in Series A, although that doesn't mean much today. So for us, the way we try to define that is post-product market fit. So those companies that have already kind of figured out the market and the product or the consumers, and they're ready to scale, and that's where we want to invest and help them scale, go much faster in the current market and potentially internationally. That's something that we always try to look for, is actually the path to internationalization in most of the companies we get in, because to your point, like, we're looking for very big companies with a very big ambition, and today the world is really, really global. So in order to be one of those big companies, it's very hard to just stay in one local market. We're also sector agnostic. Our portfolio is almost half split B2B, B2C, and in the different verticals like healthcare, mobility, consumer, like consumer mobile, everything really. Just a few exceptions. And yeah, and we get pretty much involved once we invest. We do about like 10 to 15 investments a year. We're in equal partnership, so that means we all get pretty much involved once we invest. And yeah, very briefly, that's us.
Thanks. And Louis?
Yes, nice to meet you all. So I work for a fund called Point Nine, which is a pan-European seed fund. We exist for about 10 years. We invest much earlier than these guys, actually. The goal for us is to invest when entrepreneurs are close to product market fit, and to help them structure their organizations so that they can kind of escape velocity and go see Cayet, Ben, and other Series A fund and raise 5, 10, 15 million euros. We invest anywhere between 100K and 2 million or euros or dollars in rounds of, let's say, 1 to 3 that we always try to lead. We do about 10 to 15 investments per year, and the approach that we have is to be very like thesis driven, in the sense of like we try to really understand what's happening in the software landscape, primarily in B2B, and to explain that online. So we are known, I guess, in the software and in the startup ecosystem for the content that we publish, which kind of explains the thesis that we have on certain sector. We were the first investor in businesses such as Zendesk, which was a small company in Copenhagen at the time, which has now probably the largest space in Station F and a big space in the US as well, of Algolia, of Typeform in Barcelona, of Contentful in Berlin. Quite a bunch of businesses that started really, really early and that we had get to the Series A, and that some of them are now pretty big. Yeah, so that's us.
Thanks for those specificities. So, as a startup, so you have to consider meeting a VC at the good moment, meaning seed or Serie A, maybe depending on your proof of concept, be it technical, be it commercial, whatever your stage you're at. What's interesting is that basically the ratio is almost the same for all VC funds, meaning they meet like 2,000, 3,000 startup as a yearly pipe. And at the end, there are like 10 to 15 investments, which is close to 0.5%, which is not very high. And it's always a small team that do the decisions. So you need as a startup to have the good argument at the good moment. So basically, you need an idea, you need a team, you need to show the team is the one that will develop the idea into a product which will meet a market fit. But this is very general, so I'd like one insight from one of each of you to say this point is very critical for us, and that makes a difference. So Louis again.
Yeah, happy to start. I think beyond all of this, I just mentioned two things. The first is the customer focus. So like, how much do you understand your customers, and how much of that is actually baked into your product? We're looking for some kind of unique insights, because this unique insight is at the kind of basis of your differentiation long term. And the second point is like the ambition, like how much can you build on top of that unique insight to actually build a very, very large company. And that's not the case all the time, actually.
Yeah, at the seed moment, the point is to see, is there something to structure and to develop very high, and Serie A is more like, it's structured, there is very big interest in it, and that's the moment where you can intervene. So Ben, what would be your focus?
Yeah, so I basically have I had the same 2 points as Louis, maybe to kind of put a couple of practical things around them. I think I'm always amazed by the number of meetings I have with founders where they don't proactively show the product in the first meeting. And I would say I think we're all probably very kind of product mindset investors. We really like to understand that a product has been built to serve a customer need, and that the founding team are spending a lot of time with the potential users. But it's also often, I mean, in the cliche saying, like a picture is worth 1,000 words, like a product demo can often save 2 hours of discussion about what a product does. And so I think that's a great way of kind of helping to kind of capture the kind of product minds that a lot of us have, or the product kind of focus. And then I think on vision, I think it touches back to what we were saying in the introduction, that we look for companies that have the opportunity or the potential to become a multi-billion-dollar company. And that means a few things. It means that it's a big market. It means that the product has potential for probably expansion beyond the initial core. It means that the product has probably geographic expansion potential as well, or at least some of those vectors. And I think I always like to see founders and companies who can explain their kind of initial hypothesis of the steps they would have to take to get to the kind of billion-dollar outcome, because it's generally not just scaling up exactly what they're doing today. And so that's going to evolve over time, and that's a big part of what we like to kind of help and work with founders on kind of refining. But seeing a kind of version 1 of that, or kind of the initial hypothesis, I think is a really compelling part of a great pitch as well.
If I may pick up just on that, because we have a similar view, I think most of the time when you meet a seed stage or even a Series A founder, like telling him, okay, how do you get to $1 billion business is like a really what question to ask. Let's say it. I think what matters more is like having this big vision, but being focused on like how step by step you're gonna get there. And so in the end, it's having some kind of clarity on execution short term, but depicting a very large vision at the back. And so don't be afraid by like, okay, I need to build $1 billion business. Be focused on the operations, but try to, dream about something big.
Yeah, exactly. And to that point, one of the things that we somehow are always looking for is how you're building the longer term defensibility. And to Louis' point, is at every step. So how is your company going to be different than the other 100 companies trying to do the same thing that you're trying to do in some other geography? What makes you so unique? And it might be that you have the consumer hat better put on, and you understand better your consumer, and you can get to that wow effect when you're a consumer, when you see your product. So it might be a much more product-driven approach. Might be as well, more like network effects with very low switching costs. What is that thing that is really making you potentially the winner? It doesn't mean that it's going to be just one winner, but how you're approaching that step by step. And I completely agree with you. This is something that sometimes we might tend to ask, which is like, how is this going to be $1 billion company? But we're not looking for how is it going to be tomorrow, but really how you're thinking through that vision, and then how that applies in the way you execute on a kind of almost daily basis, if that makes sense.
You need also to remember that technology is moving very fast, meaning the people in front of you, they need to be convinced, but they also can evolve in their findings. Meaning you need 2 points. The first one, if you have a no, it's very important to ask why and to get some feedback to get better. It's like a job interview somehow. So maybe you should start by a VC that you know that you won't get in to get better at the exercise, which is not always very simple. Another point is I read some interview from Jean de la Roche-Brochard from Kima Partners was stating one day I was like, B2C is a no, and pet food is a no. And 2 weeks after, I was signing a deal with a big B2C e-commerce startup in the US. So everything is moving very fast. It's very difficult to say in 10 years will be the best, but yeah, try to find some clarity and a step-by-step approach. Those are your the point you need to work on. Lastly, France is a very small market. That's something which must be remembered. If you convince the whole French market, it's less than 1% in the world, so it's very different from, for instance, from the US market or the Chinese market. We are lucky to be there at B2B Rocks and Station F, which are very good flagships, I would say, for the French startup and the French tech. From an abroad, let's say, or international point of view, what would you recommend to a French startup compared to other countries' startups? Kaye, can you provide some?
Sure. So one observation for me, and it might sound kind of basic, but it's focusing more on the story. I think Southern Europeans were very good at like looking at the past and proving, those are my great metrics, and this is where I'm going to go to the next phase. But we're less so good to the point we were discussing before about like really telling what's the vision, how this becomes big, like telling the story, like having that story and making me think how this is a big problem and you're solving for it, and you have that willingness and that ambition to go really, really big. I think that's something that is a bit in our culture compared to maybe other cultures where they're better at telling, better quote unquote, telling the story. And I think just focusing on that a little bit more and having that ambition and being willing to just go and take bigger markets very, very quickly. So not just thinking, sometimes it makes sense to do the country by country expansion in Europe, but sometimes it makes even more sense to say like I'm a French company or I'm a Spanish company or German company and I'm gonna go take the US. So I think the combination of those two things should be a bit more present. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Thanks.
It's gonna be hard not to say the same thing, but
You can say I agree, and
No.
then it's banned. But
I think no. But I think what matters here is to say, like, maybe 5-10 years ago there was no role model in the French ecosystem in the sense of like there were no really really large tech startups. Today there are, like Algolia is one, the Taiku is one, and there are a bunch of upcoming ones that are going to be really really big. So the first thing is like it's not because you're French that you can't dream big, and some people will believe in that. And we believe in that. We all believe in that here. And the point is, don't get crazy. I'm like, okay, this is the $1 billion business I'm going to build. Be focused on like the small steps, but still keep large ambitions, and people will follow you. I think that's the first one. And the second one, which is probably more practical, is like, I think the issue of French people like me is that we don't speak English very well. So don't be afraid of, from the get-go, say, we're going to speak only one language in this company, and it's going to be English because that's the only way we're going to make this company really big. And at the longer you wait to do that, the harder it is, because then you need to go to 50 people and tell them, look, now we speak English, you French. And it's a tough game. So from the get-go, write everything in English, hire people that are non-French, and make sure that everybody speaks English in the office. It's tough at the beginning, but it makes a huge difference after.
I would add, yeah, I have a bad accent, but I'm French, so normally I'm okay. The point is, sometimes people they are focusing on a very close market, and they say, yeah, my neighbor is convinced, so it's good. It's very good also for a startup to go and try the neighbor after with a different culture, maybe different problems. And when you come back, you are richer in your arguments, in the way you understand your product, and the way you can convince your real neighbor. And that's fun because some of our clients, they say, yeah, I've been in the US, French market was very hard, and now my commercial in the US, they sell our product from the US in France. Yeah, so try to understand a different point of view on your product. Don't be afraid to confront what you do. And yeah, your mother is a good advisor, but you can go also larger.
Maybe not so as not to duplicate, looking at it in a different way. I think if you look at the French ecosystem now, I think, as you say, you've got amazing places like this. You've got incredible talent, and I think that as kind of that talent grows and grows, and the thing, organizations like Google and Facebook spend more time and kind of train more talent here, you have this really deep talent pool that is kind of globally renowned. I think you've got the eyes of the kind of global investor base on Paris and France now. I think every time I talk to a US investor, they're spending more time here. They're kind of more and more excited about what's going on. And I think you've got already now some areas with some really successful companies. I think you kind of mentioned a couple of companies in the developer tools, infrastructure. I think insurance has been we've seen a lot of kind of really interesting companies, and fintech in general. So I think there's all these positive things. And I think what that kind of makes me think is that the pieces are all there to be a kind of a global competitive ecosystem with San Francisco, New York, and Tel Aviv and London. And I think that making sure that the kind of problems that you're building companies to solve are kind of big enough and global enough is a kind of an important thing to think about. Making sure that you're starting out going, we're starting in Paris and we're starting with this version of the product solving this specific problem, but actually we want to be the best at this. We want to build the best thing globally, and we want to make sure that our product isn't just the best in the local market, but it has things that are different to the best one in the US. And kind of starting with that mindset, I think even if you're kind of building up to that, I think it helps you to do some of these things. If you start at that point, it helps you to tell that compelling story. It helps you to keep following that product roadmap and to really make the most of all of the really positive pieces that are kind of really ramped up now in this market.
Maybe I can give an example of this because it might sound like really, kind of generic thoughts of like investors trying to invest in businesses, but like a year ago, there was a tiny company here at Station F called PlayPlay, which was started by the previous head of social media of Eurosport. He has close to no technical skills. He hired an agency to develop the first product and started selling to his network like a video software tool with a very strong assumption, which is everybody's going to produce video. I'm going to make the simplest video editor ever, but I'm going to produce the nicest video in the world. And when I met with him the first time, I was like, look, this is a super crowded market. I don't believe in this. A week after, 10 days after, actually, we ended up doing the deal. And today, these guys are chasing the guy. And the guy he used to be here, goes to them and say, I'm going to build the best video editor in the world. And this market, I can tell you, video is becoming huge, and I'm going to ride that wave. And so the point is, it's okay to dream big. And in the end, I think at the time when we did the deal, Thibaut was the founder, was like, look, $1 billion business, it's a tough game. And the more it goes and the more he believes in it, actually. And I'm pretty convinced that yesterday I was at the board meeting of this company, and he was like, okay, that's the plan to 10 million ARR. And this is going to be the plan to 100. And I'm not saying he's going to get there for sure, but I think he has a shot. And I hope you guys believe in it as well.
You cannot tell secrets to Louis, huh?
Yeah, the only point to consider in front of that is very good to think big, but try not to present your business model just stating top to down, like the market is 2 billion, I will take 10%, so here is my turnover in 10 years. That might be very different from the step-by-step approach that we recommended after. Think big and step-by-step. 2 points are very critical. I would like to go through another element. As a startup, when you go to a VC, basically you ask for funding. What should a funder expect from a VC apart from money?
I think more and more is probably the answer to that. I think that as more investors look to Europe, both great European investors, but also great investors from other markets, I think that the best founders are the ones who are being chased by all the investors, are really entitled to ask a lot from their investors. And I think that vice versa, well, as a founder, you should be thinking about what role or what kind of hole in my skill set or my network or the capabilities I have around me can I fill with an investor. And that might be, I mean, the kind of traditional things, network, beyond capital, it's network, introductions, access to customers, access to talent. And then I think more and more the best European firms, I know all of our firms are kind of building out operating teams that can provide specific operational support beyond the capital. So at Atomico, we have a team of 15 investors and we have a team of 10 operators. And the operators come from Google and Facebook and Uber and Spotify and Twitter. And they were formerly kind of functional execs in talent, in marketing, in international expansion and biz dev. And when we invest in companies, we give capital, but we also give access to those people as advisors and mentors and support to you as you're building your company. And I think that, I mean, it's the idea is that you can avoid some of the kind of common mistakes because those guys have worked both in the kind of Silicon Valley, US scale-up businesses that have become global successes, but also they've also worked with many of the companies across our portfolio. And I think that operational support, whether that comes from your investors who've just worked across many portfolio companies or from dedicated operators, I think that insight as well is something that really you should be looking for from the people who invest.
Yeah, as you stated, this is a very professional market, getting more and more operational, meaning it's not only finance, it's very more larger and happily, which comes to a maturity in this market, understanding more business models, understanding more that you have to maybe look not in 10 years, but next year and next year and next year. Do you have each of you a last advice you wish to share with the audience, and maybe time then for 2 or 3 questions?
They're looking at me, so I'll go first. I'd say, yeah, just to finish up on that point, and it's also a piece of advice, is use your investors as much as you want and can, because like it's super important to get the fact that we're on the same boat and we actually want the same thing. And at the beginning, there is kind of like a weird relationship maybe when we start meeting and getting to know each other. But realistically, we really want to help in everything we can. So is it platform teams? Is it like the investment team? Is it also the network? So just being able to meet other founders in our portfolio. But then in terms of like more generic advice, I would just go back to what we've said, is there is one thing we love seeing is that big ambition, thinking big. And I think the talent pool that we have in Europe is absolutely amazing. And we have more and more of those role models that we were talking about. So just like really go big and step by step, but go big and have that ambition shared with us.
I think fundraising is a weird thing because, like, it takes like 3 to 4 weeks, and in 3 to 4 weeks you need to decide who you're going to spend the next 5 to 10 years with. And what matters most, I think, beyond just this operational support and all the network, is actually the personal relationship that you will build with the one person that's going to come at your board every month or every quarter, but also that you're going to call when you have a problem. So look for brands, look for support, but also look for like people-to-people relationship, and wonder whether or not you're actually going to trust these people to help you build a business. Because yes, we're on the same boat, so make sure you bring the right people on the boat actually.
Yeah, and I think maybe picking up on that last comment, it's a much harder decision to meet somebody on week 1 and decide that you want to spend 5 to 10 years with them on week 3. And so the more it takes time to meet investors, and it takes time out of doing what you probably really much more want to be doing, which is building your companies. But making what I advise the companies I work with is to take a small amount of time out of each week or each month to keep in touch with some investors who you think are kind of the most likely investors for your next round, so that those people know you and you know them, and by the time you come to raise the round, you're not making that decision in 2 weeks, but you've kind of spent 2 years making that decision. I think for most of us, if we look back across the investments we've made in the last couple of years, the vast majority, 70, 80% of them probably, we knew the founders for over a year, and some for much longer than that. And so there are going to be times when the right investor walks through the door and offers you a term sheet in 7 days, but I think more and more that kind of longer relationship enables both sides to make a much more informed and kind of comfortable decision.
I think we have time for maybe
sure.
2, 3 questions.
One question, yeah.
Yeah. Anyone candidate? No, we might have been quite clear.
Just gonna grab the mic.
Thanks. So what are the kind of key areas that you're at the moment most excited about? Like any particular trends, or, I mean, I know it's a big question.
That's
a
the
big
secret
answer.
story part now.
Okay, I'm taking it. I'm fine with that. Yeah, we do primarily B2B at Point 9. I think the 2 things which we're quite excited about now are like B2B marketplaces. So like for the past 10 years, like most B2C markets have been kind of reshaped by marketplaces, Airbnb, Uber, and a bunch of other industries. I think in B2B markets now, there are like exactly the same opportunities where you just try to match supply and demand, where you have like numbers of players, and like for ages, like you've markets after markets, you have traders, and these traders are doing a job that can be completely automated through technology. So we invest quite a bunch in like B2B marketplaces. So one of the latest investments I've done is a company called Cargo One, which is like automating the like B2B air freight market, connecting airlines with like freight forwarders. And the second one is the next generation of like enterprise software through that's going to be more intelligent. So using data to actually build more intelligent interfaces or like build disruptive experience for B2B market. It's very generic, but I guess it helps a bit.
I agree, and I'll add to that also, anything that is consumerization of SaaS is something that we're very excited about. So just realizing that different SaaS tools that any organization uses are getting more and more specialized, and they're just like the way those companies behave are very interesting also from an investor standpoint, which is like your product market fit is going to be there much faster. You're going to realize whether you're building the right thing much faster. So it's all like faster cycles, and it's something that we also like seeing. And the market is there, and that specialization exists. So in terms of our portfolio, we've invested a few years back as a seed in Aircall out of France. Another one that is a good example of consumerization of SaaS is Beacon on HR software. So those are the type of businesses that we also really like seeing on, in addition to what Ray said.
I think we look at lots of things. For me, one thing I am spending a lot of time on is businesses doing automation of human processes. And so there are kind of two ways to think about that. There are processes that people can do that computers and software can do faster. And then there are things that humans could never do, or no reasonable number of humans in a kind of reasonable amount of time could ever do, that software can do because it takes a different approach. And so we're investing across both of those themes. I made one investment this year in a company called Automation Hero in Berlin, which is a kind of process automation business. So it automates business processes using kind of data scraping and machine learning. And then a business called Spacemaker in Norway, which automates the process of planning urban environments, so building, helping property developers to plan their sites. And that's the strapline of that business is 1 million architects in software, basically. And the idea is that while an architect maybe takes a week to play around with the design for a site, the software can try 1 million designs in 1 hour using 1,000 CPU cores in the cloud. And so it's a use of kind of automation that really no reasonable kind of cost or time of kind of human power can do. And I think that both of those automation trends for us, I think, are really exciting, and we see a lot of potential against each one.
Sorry, what's third? Last question? Sharp, quick answers.
Things where we can't get where we don't see a path towards a kind of billion-dollar company, and I think that ends up being things that we would see as components or features rather than things that are kind of full products or propositions.
God, this is a difficult one. I'd say when we don't think the market size is big enough, that's already one. Like a less obvious one is when we see sometimes the team interactions that they for some reason don't feel right. You have to judge on that very quickly, but I think having like a core team, like the co-founders, you see how they interact is an important thing to also look for. And yeah, leave some for you.
I think there is no-go because most products look like a features when they start and they become huge. Like Zendesk was looking like a feature, it became massive. So I think I'm worried about feature at the beginning, let's say. I think what a no-go is like people that are mean to their employees. Because if you're mean with your employees at the very beginning when you have 5 employees, what it's going to be like when you have like hundreds, and how you're going to manage these people. So I think in general we have a strong investment thesis around what we call good people, so like empathy. So yeah, a bit bullshit answer maybe, but that's
You said it.
Well, bullshit is fine for final closing. So thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
She's a one.